He leaned over the lake and froze. The reflection staring back at him wasn't him. The lake had always been quiet, nestled deep within the forest, shrouded in mist and mystery. Locals whispered about it in hushed tones, warning travelers not to linger near its edges after dark. "It shows things you're not ready to see," they said. For years, no one had taken the warning seriously until the night he arrived. He approached the water, flashlight in hand, the surface perfectly still, reflecting the pale moonlight. At first, it looked like any ordinary reflection. His own face stared back, eyes wide and tense. But as he leaned closer, something about the image in the water made him pause. There was a subtle difference, a shadow, a scar, a flicker in the expression. That wasn't his. A ripple suddenly disturbed the surface, as if the lake had drawn a slow, deliberate breath. He blinked, and the reflection changed. It was older, its eyes hollow, its skin lined and weathered in a way that made his chest tighten. It wasn't just a reflection, it was a warning. The face moved before he did, turning its head before he looked, smiling when he didn't, frowning when he was still calm. Every motion was synchronized, yet disturbingly different. His heart raced. He stepped back instinctively, but the reflection stepped forward. He moved right, it moved left. He raised his hand, the reflection raised both, like it was aware of his every thought, responding before he even acted. Fear gripped him, making his knees tremble. What was this? A trick of the light? A hallucination? But the cold air against his skin told him otherwise. The forest was still, silent, holding its breath. He remembered the stories. Travelers who had stared too long into the lake often vanished, never to return. Others came back with blank expressions, speaking of visions that haunted them for life. He had thought it was legend, superstition, until now. His own reflection, alive and independent, stared back at him. The older version of himself leaned closer in the water, lips moving silently, and he could almost hear a whisper in the wind. The words weren't clear, but the message was unmistakable. This is your future. A shiver ran down his spine. Could this be what he would become? The scars, the weariness, the haunted expression, were they inevitable, or was the lake offering a choice, a warning he could still heed? The ripple intensified. The reflection's eyes glowed faintly, as though catching some inner light that the forest hid from a naked eye. Every nerve in his body screamed to look away, to run, to escape, but curiosity chained him in place. His reflection began to move faster, performing actions he hadn't yet done. It mimicked his every gesture with eerie perfection, yet exaggerated his smallest flaws, the twitch in his jaw, the tightening of his shoulders, the way his fingers trembled. Time seemed to distort. Minutes stretched into hours, or was it seconds? The air around the lake thickened, the mist rising and swirling in patterns that suggested intent, as if the very environment was aware of him, of the reflection, of the unspoken pact being made. He reached out hesitantly, fingertips hovering above the water. The surface shimmered under his hand, the older reflection staring at him with a piercing intensity that made him question whether it was seeing him or seeing through him. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the movement stopped. The reflection froze mid-motion, mouth open slightly, eyes wide with a silent plea or warning. He leaned closer, desperate to understand, and the water shivered one last time. The reflection's image blurred, distorted into waves and streaks, before snapping back to normal, himself staring back. The older, scarred version was gone. The forest around him felt heavier, the silence deeper. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He stumbled back from the water, gasping for air, trying to convince himself it had been a trick of light, fatigue, or imagination. But the ripples lingered, concentric circles spreading across the lake as though the water itself had been alive, marking the spot where he had been warned. He didn't dare stay longer. Every instinct screamed to leave, to forget the terrifying vision he had just witnessed. But deep down, he knew the lake had shown him something he couldn't unsee. The future he had glimpsed was not just a possibility. It was a shadow of what could be, a path lined with scars and regrets if he didn't change his ways. He ran through the forest, branches slapping his face, roots trying to trip him, but adrenaline kept him upright. Every step he took echoed the ripples of the lake in his mind. The whisper of the older reflection haunted him, repeating in fragments, "This is your future, your future. When he finally reached the edge of the forest and the lights of the nearby town came into view, he turned back once more. The lake was calm, serene, perfectly still, reflecting only the moon and stars. There was no trace of a scarred reflection, no ripples, nothing to suggest that the surreal experience had ever occurred. Yet he knew it had, and he knew he would never return, not willingly, because the lake didn't just reflect the present. It revealed what lurked ahead, what was inevitable if he ignored the warning. The image he had seen was a ghost of his own future, staring back with eyes that demanded attention. A warning that he would carry forever. From that night on, he avoided the lake. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the older version of himself, scarred, hollow, haunted. It lingered at the edge of his vision, reminding him that some reflections are not just mirrors, they are glimpses of what could come, what may already be waiting just beyond the surface of reality. No one could force him to return. No one could convince him it was safe. The lake had spoken, and he had listened too late to unsee, but just in time to remember. And every reflection he saw in mirrors, windows, or puddles reminded him, the future is watching, and sometimes it waits in the still water, ready to show you exactly who you could become. The lake had always been an enigma, its glassy surface reflecting the sky so perfectly that it was impossible to tell where reality ended and reflection began. But that night, the ordinary serenity of the lake shattered. He had been staring for what felt like minutes, trying to comprehend what he had seen in the water, an older, scarred version of himself. The memory of that face still lingered like a cold shadow on his mind, and then it whispered his name. The sound was almost imperceptible, carried by the gentle breeze, yet it cut through the silence with a clarity that made his blood run cold. It was his name, but not quite him. There was a weight, a tone in the whisper that suggested warning, urgency, and something more otherworldly. His heart raced uncontrollably, and his legs threatened to buckle beneath him, yet he couldn't look away. There was a magnetism to the lake, a pull that defied logic, as if it demanded he watch and understand, even at the risk of his sanity. He blinked, and just like that, the reflection was gone. The older version of himself, the one with hollow eyes and lined, scarred skin, vanished entirely, leaving only the calm, undisturbed surface of the water in its place. The sight should have reassured him, it didn't. The ripples remained, tiny circles spreading outwards from where the reflection had vanished, moving in a rhythm that felt alive, purposeful, almost sentient. The lake itself seemed to pulse, a living entity aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every thought that passed through him. Locals had long warned travelers about the lake. They said that anyone who stared too long would see visions, not of the present, but of the future. Some dismissed these tales as superstition, stories parents told children to keep them from wandering too close at night. But standing there, feeling the weight of the whisper still clinging to his ears, he realized that these were not merely stories. They were warnings, a caution for anyone daring or foolish enough to look too closely. The forest around him remained silent, save for the occasional creak of an ancient tree or the distant call of a nocturnal bird. Yet the atmosphere felt charged, almost oppressive. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow deeper. He stepped back instinctively, but the lake drew him in, demanding his attention, teasing him with the promise of revelations he wasn't ready to comprehend. It wasn't just a body of water, it was a mirror of possibilities, each ripple carrying a whisper of what could be, what might come, what should never be witnessed. His mind raced. What had he seen in that fleeting moment? The reflection had disappeared, yes, but the impression it left was indelible. Scarred skin, hollow eyes, a warning encoded in expression alone. It wasn't a future to look forward to, it was a cautionary tale, a glimpse of choices left unchecked, of paths taken wrong, of consequences unavoidable. He felt an unshakable certainty that this was not merely chance or coincidence. The lake had purpose, intent, and a terrifying understanding of what it revealed to him. He crouched closer, examining the still ripples, tracing the concentric circles with his fingers, but they were not ordinary. The water resisted touch, subtly shifting and moving, responding to his presence. Each small disturbance seemed to echo through the lake, magnifying the silent warning. He could feel it, the lake remembered. The lake remembered everyone who had stared too long, everyone who had dared to peer into their own destiny. And somehow, he knew it remembered him too. The thought of the local stories came back. Those who stared too long often returned, but they were never quite the same. Eyes haunted by knowledge they could not forget. Faces etched with fear and recognition of something beyond comprehension. And some, the whisper suggested, never returned at all. It wasn't a myth. It was a test, a judgment, and perhaps even a trap, all wrapped in the guise of a serene, innocent-looking lake. He realized then that the lake's reflection was not a mirror of the present. It was a doorway, a portal into the spectrum of futures awaiting him, each ripple a different possibility. Some futures were ordinary, mundane, even comforting. Others were horrifying, filled with regret, pain, and a sense of inevitability that suffocated the soul. And as he stared at the ripples, trying to make sense of what he had seen, he understood. The lake chose what to show. It revealed not what was likely, but what needed to be seen. Fear mingled with fascination, binding him to the lake's edge. He wanted to run, to escape, yet his body refused. Curiosity anchored him, a dangerous tether to something he knew he shouldn't witness. The whisper of his name still lingered, a phantom sound carried in the wind and in the water itself. And in that moment he understood the truth. Some futures are never meant to be seen by mortal eyes. They exist in shadows, on the edge of perception, waiting to shape those who dare look. As the moonlight shifted across the surface, the ripples slowly faded. The water became smooth again, reflecting only the stars, the treetops, and his own present face. Yet the knowledge he had gained lingered. He had glimpsed a shadow of what could come, a fragment of inevitability. The lake had shown him a future both haunting and instructive, leaving him to grapple with the consequences, with the weight of knowledge too heavy to bear. Shaken to his core, he turned away from the water, walking back into the forest, but the lake's presence followed him. Every step echoed the ripples in his mind. Every shadow in the trees reminded him of the reflection that had whispered his name. The night was alive with the memory of what he had seen, a lingering pulse of something beyond the natural world. And though the reflection was gone, he knew it would never truly leave him. From that night on, he avoided the lake, but the warning was indelible. He would never forget the whisper of his name, the sudden disappearance, and the cold certainty that some glimpses into the future are not gifts. They are reminders of what lurks beyond the fragile veil of the present. And in quiet moments, he could still feel the lake calling him back, as if daring him to stare once more, to see what he was not meant to know.